Good morning. It's 10 a.m. here where I am, and it's a time to get started about our discussion today. I I look forward to talking about our topic, which deals with the grieving and remembering and how much that can help the grieving process and helping people at the end of their life with their stories. It's really kind of a sacred work when we remember people who have passed on or help people who are near the end of their life to record and get their stories down. And I've had the opportunity to work with quite a few clients who are at the end of their life to help them to. Oftentimes we do some oral history recordings and then write it down. And there have been many times, there's actually been 4 times when I worked with a client, and within weeks after we finish their oral history recordings, they pass away. And then I have the opportunity to write about their life and put a book together for them. And it's a blessing to do. It's also difficult, but rewarding to be able to help someone in that process and in that journey. And so today, we're going to do a couple of tutorials about this. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of how remembering someone who's passed on can help with the grief process, and talk about a few different things that you can do and some ideas that really help with that. And then we'll do another tutorial where we will talk about the process of working with people at the end of their life in a few weeks. So today we're going to focus on grief and remembering and how that can help. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see some of the notes that I have written down here. Like I said, I worked with a lot of people who have been going through the grief process, because after their loved one passes away, then we will write it into a book for them. And so I work with those families and trying to help them to get this work complete. And it's been interesting as I have come to realize even more that everyone deals with grief in a different way, and we have to just make room for everyone at the table so that they can go through the process in the way that they need to. And so sometimes people need a little time after that loved one dies to really work on the process of writing their history and remembering them. And sometimes it needs to be immediate. And so I want to talk about that in a few different ways. So I also had some personal experience with this when my father passed away in December. I had helped people, and I have had, my grandparents pass away, but never someone quite as close as my father. And he only lived a block from me. And so we were very close. I saw him on a daily basis for most of my life. And he had cancer, and I took him to most of his cancer treatments 3 years before his passing. And he beat cancer. And so we weren't really expecting him to pass away as quickly as he did, because he always beat everything that he had before. So it was a bit of a shock for us. And the process of grief, for anyone who's experienced it, it's daunting and it's difficult. But I have found the best ways to overcome it have been through doing different things to remember him and to share his life. So there's a few ways that I want to talk about that we can remember our loved ones who have passed on or who are dealing with end of life situations. Talk about them. Just even talking about them is very therapeutic. Looking through old photos will jog memories of stories about them that you can write down, because photos just elicit memories. And you see a photo of, oh yeah, that's when we went to Disneyland together, or that's when we took that road trip, or I remember my graduation day and when my dad said this or that. Photos really kind of elicit beautiful memories. And then music, listening to some of music that you either shared with that person, that is another way, and we'll go into more detail as we go. And then memorabilia, I'm looking through some of their old things, and then finally writing and sharing. And that process can go on for a really long time after they have passed on. So I found in those first few weeks after my dad passed, and when we knew he was going to pass, that I would be over at my parents and helping my mom with things. And then I would come home in the evenings and my children would all be around, and we would just talk about him and talk about all of our different experiences until the wee hours of the morning. And I think sometimes talking can kind of start jogging those memories and those thoughts. And then oftentimes, when we would talk, I would just write down just some little notes so that I could revisit it later. So I could go into more detail into a story that I had heard or different things. So I wasn't immediately writing a big long story, but just taking a couple of notes as we talked, just on little Post-it notes is what I would do. And sometimes I would just write one word so that I could remember that story later on. And so talking can make a big impact, especially right after, when all of your feelings are fresh and your memories are fresh. Just talking about it, and then maybe just writing a couple of notes is helpful. And then one of the biggest things that helped me to remember things, and I've noticed with everyone that I work with, whether they're near the end of their life or just writing their own life story, when they pull out the photos, they remember events and things. And so when you pull out those photos, those memories will just come crashing back, and you'll remember details that you may have forgotten when you see the photo, and you remember kind of what was going on when that photo was taken. And I think it's really valuable to give everybody a chance to look at a photo with that person or something they share, and then share it and let them share their experiences. And that's another opportunity that you can take a couple of notes, write them down, and have them at the ready when you're ready to write, or when you're ready to do your oral history recording. One thing that we did in our family is my son-in-law organized all the photos as we went through them. And so he put them into categories of, my dad with me and my dad with my sister and our family and with each grandchild. And so then it helped us to kind of organize and get things ready. So when we write his life story, we have those photos organized and can kind of go through and catalog them. And that was such a great idea that he had to do that. And so that was very helpful, and has worked really well during this process of trying to put something together to tell his life story. Music is a really big step and helpful in the remembering and in the grieving process. It's interesting that how music can invite grieving. I know I created a playlist of songs that reminded me of my dad. And when I'm feeling like just tender and sentimental, I listen to that music, and it really helps with that process. It also invites joy. Music is happy for the most part, or it's sad, but it just creates an emotion that I think we need to feel in that process. And then oftentimes listening to the music that they loved kind of gives insight into who passed away, into that person, and helps you know and understand them a little bit better. And I think that was something that was really helpful for my children in the grieving process with my dad, is that they kind of understand who he was by the music that he loved. And then, of course, it generates stories, more stories for you to share and to write down. You can talk about a concert you may have attended with them, or how that song reminds you of that person, and why that kind of touches or ignites a spark within you. And that there's always stories that go with songs and music. And it's a really good idea to try to capture those. And then it just brings back such beautiful memories. Another thing I would suggest, as you look through photos and listen to music and go through memorabilia, is to pick someone to write those couple of notes down. So when you want to revisit it, or work on it more, you have that written down. I usually am the scribe for my family, but if you have someone that would feel comfortable just jotting down some notes and some thoughts as you're going through things and spending that time together, that's a really good idea to do something like that along those lines. So memorabilia is something that is really tangible and helpful and helps us to remember that person. You pick something up and you remember where you were when you got it, or the thoughts that came from that. And then it makes you feel really close to that person because it's things that they've touched or that they've worn or things that they've handled. And one thing that I find interesting, and this is true, when I go to memorials or different things, is everyone has a different memory or a different memorabilia item that they reminds them of that person. And sometimes we're surprised that, oh, that reminds you of, your mom or your grandma or, whatever. But it's really significant to be able to share all of those things. And so that is something that's really special. And I remember as we had a box that we gathered of my dad's things. And as people tenderly put the items in that box, what a special experience that was. And then we went over to the church where we had the memorial, and we carefully took them out and placed them on the table. And just what a sweet experience that was for all of us to carefully place his things out and the memories that made. And it's part of the grief process that was really special and beautiful. So I want to spend a big chunk of our time talking about writing things down or doing an oral history. There are a lot of different ways to conquer this and to make it work. We can tell their story, by writing it down or by oral history, whatever we choose to do. And the process is different for everyone. Like I kind of shared at the beginning, we oftentimes, it can feel overwhelming to us to think, well, I need to write down their life story if you haven't done it prior to their passing or prior to their illness. And so then we know we want to do it. We know we need to do it, but we feel a little bogged down by grief and by sorrow. And then we don't because it feels big and overwhelming. So the biggest thing I would say is just when those memories are fresh in your mind, just try to write something down. And then when the time is right, then you can start to write it. The time might be right after their death, but you may need a little time to think about it and to grieve. But don't let those few fresh moments pass where you don't share these things, so that as time passes and you're feeling more ready to write and to share, that you have forgotten things. Keep your photos handy, remember your music, think of your memorabilia, go to a place where you will remember. I would suggest there's a couple of different ways you can approach it. You can just write down some vignettes of things that you remember about them that you would like to share. If you don't know a lot about that person's growing up time, that's okay. You can write down what you know, but if there are people that are still living that remember them and know, then you can talk to those people and you can record their memories. You can record it through oral history, or you can write down those things, and then you have a little bit of those memories as well. Oftentimes we know enough to be able to write down those memories and those things. And I think once you have written down something that could be a semblance of a story for that person, we feel relieved, and we can go back and enjoy it later and share it with others. A couple of ways that you can share what you've decided to write or record. You can make hard copies, of course, and pass them out to the family. Another thing you can do is share it on social media. My family has pages that are closed pages just for members of the family. And there we have shared little stories about family members who have passed on. We shared the video that we created for my dad's memorial. He passed away during COVID, and so not all the family could attend. And so these were ways for them to make them a part of what went on there, is to share that video. You also can share these things, in the cloud, like through Dropbox or Google Docs, so that everyone that would like to see it can do that. Or you can upload those things to Family Search or to Ancestry or to MyHeritage. One thing that was very therapeutic for me with my father was to go in and upload his obituary and upload the talk that I gave at his funeral, and upload pictures. We went into Ancestry, and Ancestry has old yearbooks. And so we looked at the years that my dad had attended high school, and we found all these photos of him, of different clubs he was in and different things that he did that he didn't necessarily share with us. And so it was so fun to go in and see those things. And Ancestry has that. It's just a really neat kind of treasure trove of information. And so we were able to download those photos. And then we also put those on his memories page in Family Search. So now everyone can go and see all of those embarrassing yearbook photos. And then another way that you can share is in a writing group. I know I talked a few weeks ago about writing groups, and I lead a writing group, and many of the people in that group have had loved ones who have passed away. And that is what they're writing about. And what a sweet experience it is to be part of that writing group, where we're able to share openly and feel all of those emotions and that grief that is coming out onto the pages, and sharing those things in a writing group with friends and people that you trust is special and powerful and important. It works really well to do something like that. And so I would suggest that that's a good way to share too. You can even create a writing group with your family, and you can all take turns writing and sharing. The biggest thing I would say is, if you choose to write, don't try to eat the elephant in one bite. Take it one bite at a time. Don't overthink it. Just kind of let it be what it is, because whatever you write down is going to be more than you did the day before. Don't spend, if you haven't already written that person's life story, don't feel guilty about it. Do what you can now. When you're in that grief process, when you're thinking of them, don't worry about what you didn't do. Just worry about what you can do now. And there's a lot of really great things that can be done and can be discovered even after their death. You will find people, I know even at the memorial, one thing that you can do is to ask people to share a memory or two and put it into a little jar. And then you'll have those things and you can record them and write them down. And that is something that is a pretty cool thing to ask people to do, because they're more than willing, because they're there, because they have memories of that person. And one thing, and I shared this at the beginning a little bit, grief is different for everyone. And so for me, remembering and writing things down helps in my grief. For others, maybe that's not the case. There are a lot of really great things that you can do. You can plant a tree for that person. Sometimes just spending time at the cemetery and thinking of them. Some people throw a party at the cemetery. You can create a time capsule about that person, or like I say, a memory jar, and it just can be 3 or 4 words of memories of that person that you can share. So there's a lot of different methods and ways that you can process your grief through remembering. And it doesn't have to be writing it down, and it doesn't even have to be sharing it publicly. There are little other things that you can do, even journaling. Sometimes we just need to write something that no one will see, to share that memory. And that is something that works really well. I know for me, journaling helps me a lot to process. And I don't know if anyone will read those journals, but I know that it's helped me to process things. And so sometimes journaling and writing those stories that are only for you is okay to do too. So I, as we think about and talk about approaching these end of life situations, they're tender and they're sensitive, and we have to find the way that best fits for us, and to try to not judge others for what fits best for them. um, I often find if you want to write their story, sometimes finding a third party that maybe doesn't know that person but can interview people and talk to them can be really helpful as well, because it takes that burden off of your shoulders, but you know that it will be getting done. And so that can be valuable and helpful. So I would just say that grief is tough, but remembering can be easy and beautiful. And so just take some time to remember, and it will help heal you.